Hey everyone, time for another Tyranid Tactica video. This time we're going to be looking at Raveners. So this is a unit that you might actually see too often. Generally, for the most part, most people kind of regard them as not working so well, and the new Tyranid Codex, well, and just 40k as a whole right now, it's just since it doesn't support assault armies quite as well as it does shooting armies. But Raveners do have their place in a few lists now, and if you learn how to play them right, they can actually be quite a lot of fun and actually work pretty well on the table. So I'm going to go over the basics with them, kind of what you need to have on the table to make them work. For the most part, I found you need at least 6 of them to run. A lot of people run them with up to 9. I haven't tried that yet. I do have 9 of them, but I've run 6, and 6 seems to be the sweet spot. Anything lower than that, they just kind of don't have the hitting power on the table that they need. Rending claws, excuse me, are an absolute must to have on them. It makes them an extreme threat to any vehicles on the table, and makes them rather deadly to a lot of infantry too. And also having death spitters, I found, is pretty decent on them as well. Death spitters aren't an absolute must, but I found they are a pretty solid option on the Raveners. Just kind of gives them a bit of hitting power, and depending where you get them placed, they can pop a lot of transports, as it is 18 strength 5 shots, so generally for the most part that'll glance armor 10 vehicle to death in one volley for the most part if your rolling's pretty decent. So now we're going to talk about deploying them and kind of what lists work with them. I find the lists that work well with Raveners, you need Flyrants work well, just since the Flyrants kind of go ahead and fly up the table pretty far, and for the most part most opponents kind of dump a lot of shots in them. Or at least get distracted by the Flyrants, then these guys can kind of pop up or zoom forwards towards the Flyrants. So the one thing you kind of got to decide the first is if you're going to deep strike them or just start them on the table. I've deep striked them and started them on the table before, and I find there isn't really a wrong or right answer here. It's kind of depend on what else is on the table. The time I deep struck them, they ended up coming up behind a transport and blowing it up and charging the contents and wiping them out. So it worked pretty well there, and the time they were on the table they were able to slink around cover and actually worked pretty well because they would just hide away in there, and for the most part my opponent's shooting at Carnifexes or Venom Thropes or Gargoyles providing cover. So these guys generally get ignored for the most part, but when they actually hit combat they hit pretty hard. So you kind of got to decide, and this is going to be vary from opponent to opponent, and what armies you're facing and how you're going to deploy them. So you kind of have to use your own personal judgment there. I'm not going to say there is a right or wrong answer, but you do have to think about both those things. With these guys too, you gotta really work on keeping them in cover and also placement of them. Don't keep them really cluttered together if your opponent has a lot of strength 8 blast, because they are very susceptible to instant death, being their only toughness 4. They do have a lot of wounds though, and they can kind of soak a bit of damage if small arms does happen to target them. So again, you got to think about who you're playing and where they're going to get targeted. So yeah, the Raveners aren't hard to use. The point of this video is just to kind of give you an idea of how to use them and maybe convince you to try them out and hopefully have some success. They're extremely fun to use, they're very fast, and when they hit combat, they hit hard. The one thing about them though is between them and Shrikes, stat-wise, they're the exact same. The only difference between these guys and Shrikes is Shrikes can take flesh hooks and are synapse, which I think is a huge bonus. One nice thing with Raveners I will say is how they can take Death Spitters and not give up one of their close combat weapons, which is nice. I think Synapse kind of outweighs that a bit, and also the fact that Shrikes can take flesh hooks, because the one big disadvantage for these guys is charging through cover, being dropped to initiative 1. They do ignore the charge penalty, but they are still dropped to initiative 1, so it's kind of bad. If your opponent's smart and places whatever the Raveners happen to be hunting in cover, it can make for a little bit of a rough time for them. But for the most part, that's really it to think about for Raveners. They are definitely usable, so just remember Rending Claws are an absolute must on them. Keep them in cover. Decide at the start of the game if you're going to deep strike them or not. Make sure you commit with them. If you're going to deep strike in, don't deep strike and just kind of hide them. If you're going to go for something, go for it. Blow the transport up, or place Flyrants or other Tyranid units near them to kind of draw heat away from them. So you want to give your opponent tough choices with these guys, and give them a hard time to decide shooting at the Raveners or shooting at whatever else you got coming at them. So if there's any other Tyranid Tactica videos you want to request, I did a showcase video so you can kind of see everything I have to play with as of now. So if you're curious about any of the units or just have any questions, comments, or feel like you want to add anything, just toss her in the comment section, and hopefully we can discuss more. And I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about using Raveners, so any thoughts or successes or failures you've had with them. So again, thanks for watching. There'll be more tactical videos, probably another one for Shrikes as I get them built, and maybe one for Gene Stealers, just because I really want to try them out. I got a bunch on the painting table, so I know they're pretty junky, but maybe I'll find a way to use the minimum small units in an army and see how they fare. So again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe.